Well, hi everyone. Welcome again to the New England Racing Show. Manchester, New Hampshire, Channel 23, also on YouTube, and I'm your host, Bill Sturgis. Well, last week was supposed to be a big block supers at Lee Speedway, the ISMA Supers, and their biggest show of the year. And as usual, it got rained out. It's been quite a rainy summer, to say the least. It seems like it always rains on Friday night. So what we did was we did a tour of our race car shop as far as setting up a small block super, because we race a small block super at Lee on Friday nights. My son PJ is the crew chief and Jake is the driver, and we figured that we'd like to show people how you set up the Supermodified, what maintenance it involves, and how you make adjustments at the track. So we took a little tour of our garage the other night, and here it is. Well, hi everyone. We were originally planning to show you the ISMA Big Block Supers at Lee Speedway this past Friday night. Unfortunately, the weather didn't cooperate and it got washed out completely. In addition to the big blocks, they had the small block supers. And that's what we race at Lee Speedway every Friday night. So what we're going to do, rather than just show any race, we're going to take you on a tour of our little garage here. And we're going to show you how we set up our small block super every week, and what adjustments we make to it, and our maintenance program. We have our crew chief, my other son, PJ Sturgis, is here, and he's going to explain to us how the car, what maintenance he does on the car and adjustments and how he sets it up. But just to give you a general view here, the car weighs about 1,800 pounds with the driver. It has a Chevy 350 engine. It's called a ZZ4 crate engine. Holley 650 4-barrel headers, and it puts out about 375 horsepower. And when we say a crate engine, that means that it's been gone over up in Maine by company Butler McMaster, and then they seal the engine so you can't take it apart. They seal the intake manifold, the heads, and about all you can do is change the oil. You can mess with the carburetor a little bit. Other than that, there's not many adjustments, and it levels the playing field for everybody. Another thing it does, it takes your saves you a little time, because now instead of messing around with the engine, you know that's going to run good. Now you set up the car. So the car has four-wheel disc brakes. It's got what they call 5 wide hubs and a wing on the front. It's rack and pinion steering, and dual master cylinders for the brake. We have coilover shocks on the front, and on the rear of the car we have torsion bars. 2 torsion bars, one on each side. This is the adjuster for the other side, and you can set your ride height using that adjuster. The wing has air cylinders in it, and we set that at around 140 pounds or whatever. And what the wing does, you set it so that when you're going down the straightaway, at the end of the straightaway, the wing flattens out like it is now, and then when you let off and you slow down in the corner, the wing pops up and gives you a lot of downforce to hold the car in the corner. So as you notice, this engine is completely outside the frame to give you more left side weight, and that's what these cars are made to do. So you have about 65% left side weight, and that's your maximum that they allow you. So we set the car up based on that. So I want to introduce PJ, our crew chief here for our racing operation. Hi, PJ.
Hi.
Now, PJ's been racing since what? You were
I was since 1996, so I was 8 years old back then.
8 years old, and you've been racing quarter midgets at Little T Speedway?
Yeah, ever since 2 years after that, we started at Londonderry Speedway. 2 years later, we moved to Little T Speedway, which is where I started racing when I was 10, and been racing ever since.
And after quarter midgets, you went to what?
After quarter midgets, we did this car right here, actually, our USAC Ford Focus midget, or now known as the Nemo Light series. But then after that, we moved to the small block Supermodified division, and that's where we still are racing today.
Now, you drove this car for a few years, right?
Yeah, I raced it for 3 seasons, and after that, I was kind of figured I'd go back to the midgets just for some fun and let my brother Jake here drive the car this year. He's a rookie, and he's been impressing everybody so far.
Jake's actually won one feature and finished second in the money bags race a few weeks ago at Lee, right?
Yep. In his first season, he picked up a win. It was only his 4th start, which is probably, I think, a new record for Lee USA Speedway. So, yeah, definitely been a pretty good season so far.
So we decided to let Jake drive this car because we were testing at Star Speedway, and PJ was out there testing it, and he decided to let Jake try it out. And instantly Jake went pretty much as fast as PJ did. So we figured there's no problem putting Jake in the car. And now you set the car up every week. Why don't you show us pretty much what your maintenance is on the car?
Okay, well, basically every week, one of the main things is first we clean the car up, try to get any dirt off, do a up-close kind of inspection on every little intricacy on the car. Check any welds for cracks, and make sure all your rod ends are moving freely, your steering moves freely, your hubs, and shocks and springs and brakes, just because, of course, the speeds these cars are going, you don't want any failures at all as they're traveling over 100 miles an hour on the straightaways.
So we'll do a complete nut and bolt check. And you can see right here, some of these bolts are what you call safety wired. You drill a small hole across the head of the bolt and safety wire them all together so they can't come off. And this is the rack and pinion mount. We certainly don't want that to come off because then your steering goes away. And it always happens when you're coming out of the 4th corner and you hit the wall. So you'll see a lot of the super modifieds, the good ones, have a lot of safety wiring on them. Okay, so when you're setting the car up, what's the first thing you do?
Well, of course, with any race car, the tires are the most important part of the car. So over here, we have what we call a sticker tire, because of course it has a sticker on it like a brand new tire, and
See, there's a number on there, 85.
Yep,
what does that signify?
85 is what they call the chalk mark, which is like a number. Hoosier is a tire company. When they first make the tire, they blow it up to a certain pressure. They measure it, the circumference, and that's 85 inches. Usually it comes out about 3 inches smaller than that, I guess due to air pressure and wheel size differences. But this is a 10-inch wide tire on a 15-inch diameter wheel. It's kind of a spec tire. Everybody has to run the same ones. This is a left side tire. This particular one, the right side tires are about 3 inches bigger in circumference, which is it's an oval track car. It's always turning left.
What they call tire stagger?
Yes, tire stagger. It's a difference in circumference between the left and the right. Think of if you were to roll an ice cream cone along a table, it would spin in a circle because one side's smaller than the other. It's kind of the same principle.
So that's what they mean by stagger. Now on the rear is where you really look for a certain stagger depending on what size track it is, right?
Yes, on the back of the car is of course what drives is where the power is driven from. So that's where the tire stagger is most important. In the front, It mostly just affects you under braking, keeping the car pulling left, not right, of course. Kind of like your street car, you may hit the brakes, and if something's out of alignment, you'll feel it pull one way. We do that intentionally.
Now, on a smaller track, do you try to run more stagger on the rear?
Yeah, a smaller track with tighter radius turns, you usually want more stagger than a bigger track. But yeah, that's definitely one of the tuning tools, the many tuning tools we have on this car.
And what do you look for a range of stagger, say at Lee Speedway?
Anywhere from 2.5 to 5 inches. It really depends on driver preference, the car, what kind of other settings you're running. Definitely a wide range there.
And Lee can get pretty tricky at night because it's near the coast, and at night you'll feel the mist on the track and it gets pretty loose out there. So what do you do to compensate for that?
Well, of course, yeah, Lee's a very difficult track to set up for. Humidity and temperature and sun and all kinds of things play a very important role. So, of course, when on a hot and sticky day, the oils rise through the pavement and kind of make the track greasy. So usually we try to tighten the car up, or sometimes you hear the NASCAR guys say if it's too loose, you make it tight, and so on and so forth.
And by tightening it, what do you do to stagger? Have less stagger?
Yeah, less stagger in the back, and less stagger in the back. It will help tighten the car, and other things like usually we'll adjust the cross weight, which is the percentage of weight of the right front and the left rear divided by the weight of the total car. Generally, what you hear NASCAR guys on TV saying wedge. A round of wedge usually just means a round into the spring collar here.
Okay.
Raise the lower the car.
So once we get the wheels on the car, we've taken all that apart and jacked the car up to check everything over. Then we put the wheels on the car. We'll lower it down to the ground, and you got to do what you call ride height, correct? So how do you do the ride height?
Well, we check the ride height from the bottom of the frame rail here to the ground. You know, of course, it's on jack stands now, but yeah, once the wheels and the tires are on the car. The same thing in the rear. You want to do it right under the axle, which is where the wheels are, of course. And usually in the front, we'll shoot for a range of about 2 to 3 inches off the ground, and in the rear, 4 to 5 inches. Of course, depends on weight of the car, where your weight's placed, how much the driver weighs, and
If the track's bumpy, you have to raise the car a little bit?
of course, yeah. Bumpy track like Seekonk or Star Speedway, you raise it more than a smoother track like Lee or Stafford.
That way, when they're going in the corner, you don't see the sparks flying out from under the car, right?
Yeah, I'm sure. Anyone who's seen super modified racing has seen that at some point.
Okay, so we get the ride height where we want it, and then you put scales under each tire. Why don't you show us one of the pads here?
Yep.
We have 4 of these, right?
Yeah, this is a electronic scale, intercom electronic scale. It has a wire that plugs into the front of it, and you'll have one of these pads on each corner of the car. And well, that way it can tell you the total weight of the car, the weight of on each corner, your cross weight, rear percentage, left side percentage, all the things you need to know for weight distribution, which is very important in the way the race car handles.
And to adjust your cross weight, what do you do?
Usually you'll adjust diagonally. Take jack turns into the right front and left rear on the car, and jack turns out of the left front and right rear to add cross weight, and while keeping the ride height to the same as it was before.
So whatever you do to one corner, you have to do to the other to compensate, to keep the same ride height, correct?
Yes, race cars work very diagonally. What you do on the right front corner of the car always affects the left rear, and what you do on the left front affects the right rear.
And when they say cross weight, what range of cross weight do you look for? We're not going to give away our secret, but a general range.
General range for one of these cars is anywhere from like 46% to 54%, of course, depending on driver, engine placement, and wing placement, all sorts of different things.
So when you say cross weight, that's the right front and left rear weight as part of the total weight of the car?
Yes, yes.
So that's 45 to 54% of the total weight of the car would be on those two corners. Now, to do the front, you either raise or lower it that way with the spring adjusters.
Yes, and then of course the rear is different because it's a torsion bar style suspension.
Well, show us how you do the rear.
Well, in the back here we have these this jacking screw, which jacks more weight into this corner, which this actually controls the right rear corner, and the one on that side controls the left rear. Works kind of a little backwards. But the torsion bar stretches across the width of the car, and by putting more turns or pressure on that, you'll actually raise the right rear corner of the car and add more weight there.
And how does a torsion bar work?
Well, basically it's one big bar of steel that goes across, and this lever arm on this side will twist it, and while the other side is stationary, and it will actually twist the spring inside, and it's by twisting the spring is kind of this. It's a spring motion, and just like the front, but just kind of in a different way, still bending some sort of material to resist the car.
So it's a solid bar, but the bar actually twists, correct?
Yes, yeah, it's a solid bar, but it deforms. Some GM trucks are still like that these days, where you have a torsion bar suspension in the front.
Right, the front of my Silverado is like that. Now, what range of strength on the torsion bars do you usually look for?
In the rear, generally you'll look for around 200 to 250 pounds, and in the front, where the spring rates are about 250 to 300 pounds. So pretty similar front and rear for these cars. Of course, some people, there's lots of different theories out there as to how stiff they need to be. Some drivers prefer the front very stiff, some prefer it soft. That's all how it is, how you like the car to drive, and what you need to do to get the wheels and tires into the track.
Now these shocks, they're ARS, I believe, Advanced Racing Suspension.
Yes, these are advanced racing suspension shocks. They are built in Indiana by Advanced Racing Suspension Company. Of course, Indiana is pretty much the racing capital of the world. They have companies for everything there: shocks, engines, bodies, chassis, you name it. So.
And these are gas shocks?
Yep, this is a what they call a monotube shock, which has the gas charge in the top, as opposed to a twin tube shock like we have on the front that doesn't have gas charge in it.
And are they adjustable?
Yes, all four corners on the car are rebound adjustable, which adjusts the strength of the shock when it was coming apart, or when that end of the car is coming up. There's a small knob here on the bottom. It's kind of hard to see now, but we adjust it in one click increments, which you'd be surprised of. One or two clicks at the shock base, you can definitely feel it when you're behind the wheel.
Okay, so we got the car adjusted. We go out for our first round of practice. And Jake, it really helps to have a driver who can communicate what the car is doing to the crew chief. So what does Jake usually tell you when he comes in? What kind of information do you get from him?
Well, usually in the first practice we have old tires, so of course it's kind of difficult to say, okay, the car's going to do this on old tires, but it's going to do this on new ones. But usually if he comes in and says something like, oh, the car is too loose, which means the back end wants to slide out on him, we'll try to figure out a way to gain more rear traction to prevent that condition.
And we have what we call a panhard bar that goes from the left side here. It connects here and goes to the right side, where you can raise the right side up and down, right?
Yes, on this point here, this is where the rear panhard bar attaches. We can loosen this clamp up, slide it up or down, and change the rear roll center of the car, or also in NASCAR terms, a lot of them refer to it as the track bar, but the principle is the same. The lower you go with it, the more the rear of the car wants to roll, and the more rear traction you'll gain. The higher it is, the more the car's going to want to skid out, and the looser it will be.
So that's one way of adjusting it at the track. Another way is to adjust the rebound in the shocks, which will allow the car to shift more weight onto the right front. Is that right?
Yeah, the rebound, there's all sorts of different things that it affects. The way the whole car feels in transitions over bumps, going in and out of the turn. There's really it's a very fine-tuned adjustment, and it's something you really only want to play with once you get everything else squared away.
Now let's talk about the wing. Explain to us about the air pressure and what you can do with wing adjustments.
Well, of course, as he said earlier, we have it's an air pressure wing. It actually moves up and down.
And you can see the gauge here. What do we run, about 100 and what?
Yeah, about 140 pounds. Of course, it's different for everybody depending on what diameter your wing cylinders are and what kind of air you run in the system.
So you want the wing to do what down the straightaway?
Down the straightaway, you want the wing to flatten out, while in the corners it stands up for more rear downforce on the car. And that wing, of course, is a very big tuning tool on the car. Move it further forward it is, the more pressure it puts on the front tires. The further back it is, the more pressure it puts on the rears, which controls the handling balance of the car. It changes it quite a lot if you just move the wing 1 inch either way.
Great. So by moving these clamps forward or backward, you can move the whole wing. And you square the wing. You put a string, a line down here.
Generally, actually, on the right side, we'll hang a plumb bob off and measure it straight down from wherever it lands to the front axle to get some sort of baseline measurement as to where it is in relation to the front of the car. And usually and also another thing we change on that is the angle, the up or down angle. The up angle is what it is in the turns, and the down angle is on the straightaways. Up angle usually is anywhere from like 30 degrees. The down angle is usually around 10 down the straightaway, so it changes about 20 degrees between the straightaways and the turns.
Well, great. Okay, PJ. Thanks a lot for taking us through everything here with the Super. You've really enlightened people as to how you do things, and not only does this apply to Super Modifieds, it also applies to the Midget and a lot of race cars in general. Any open wheel car, Modifieds, Supers, Midgets, and we understand you'll be racing at Lee Friday night. So good luck to you, and thanks a lot for taking us through this.
Okay, thank you. It was fun.
There's the official guard dog of our garage. Well, I think PJ gave us a pretty good view of how the Super Modified is set up and everything. Just a couple of things I wanted to add we forgot to include. The Super doesn't have a transmission or a clutch. The drive shaft goes directly from the engine to the rear end. But the rear end has a cable that the driver controls to either put it in gear or out of gear. So what they do is the car is taken out of gear and the push truck pushes it to the line where you're going to start it. Then the driver locks it in gear and the push truck pushes the car off, turn the ignition on, the driver does, and the car will start up hopefully and take off. So that saves a lot of weight. That's one reason why the cars are so light, and that's why they have to be push started also. Well, I wanted to say a few words about the state of short track racing in general around here. And there's an alarming trend in short track racing. You look and a lot of stands are empty. Even in the NASCAR TV every Sunday, you'll see a lot of empty seats. And around here, you'll see fewer cars racing on the track too. Well, the promoters blame the economy. Well, that's an easy thing to blame, and it may in part be part of the problem. But I just want to point to a track in North Carolina, Bowman Gray Stadium, and they have 6,000 to 10,000 fans every week. The place is packed. So I mentioned this to one of our local promoters, and he said, well, they let them in for almost nothing. Okay, $5 each. Kids free. But 10,000 fans at $5 each is $50,000 through the what they call the front gate, which is where the spectators go in, versus the back gate, which is the racers who have to pay to sign into the pits. And it seems like too many promoters are just depending on the back gate and raising the prices. So you're actually paying your own way in to race. And that's not helping young fans to get involved in our racing. So, what I like to see is the lower admission prices. Instead of $12 each, make it $5 to $8, kids free. Make it affordable for a young family to go. And we need to attract people who may not be big race car fans, but just want to do an inexpensive night out and try something different. So you get a mother and dad and maybe a friend and a couple of kids, and it's $15 to get in, and make the food reasonable. Not $8 for a hamburger or a beer. I want to point out, when I went to Bear Ridge, it was $2 for a hot dog and a big bowl of fries for $5. It was really fantastic up there. They got the right idea. And then you'll see, as time goes on, you'll see more and more people in the stands. And that's what the sponsors want to see, the sponsors who put their names on these race cars. They don't want to race in front of empty grandstands. So we need to get people in there. The track could do like we do here, a little TV show and put it on YouTube every week, and that's free for the track to do something like that. I know that Stafford Speedway used to have a show on every Saturday that was on Nesson, but that got expensive, so they don't do it anymore. But they could self-produce it and put it on YouTube. Also, they can use Facebook and Twitter more effectively. They could work with town officials to promote their track and show the town that their track is a real asset to the town instead of a liability, like the officials, selectmen at Lee, New Hampshire, seem to think. And all they want to do is shut that track down, and they don't realize that it can be a real asset to the town, and it is an asset. All the businesses around there and the gas stations do a lot more business when the track runs, but the officials don't see it that way. Also, you got to get the show done in a reasonable amount of time, like 3 hours, and let people go home by 9:30 or so, at 10 o'clock the latest at night, and don't drag the show out. I used to go to Star Speedway and listen to Russ Conway get out there at intermission and blah, 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 on and on about everything that was coming up. And I'd say, gee, doesn't this guy ever shut up? And now I go to these other tracks and there's just silence. And I say, gee, I wish Russ Conway was out there telling us what was going on. And now I see what he was doing. He was promoting his track and doing a darn good job of it. And we need more people like Russ now. So that's just my thoughts on short track racing. But we will be showing some racing this week. It's supposed to be a nice day, nice weekend to be at Lee and wherever else on Saturday. We're planning on going to Riverside Speedway in northern New Hampshire and show you the action up there on Saturday. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.